Would there be a way, let's say everybody agrees with you, raise it to 23 from the now lowered 21. Is there a technical way that that could get done, first off?
Sure, we could just pass a law to do it. I mean, as your colleague just mentioned, there are some fixes that people are talking about that's going to have to get through the Congress to make some of those fixes. And my point is, you know, this happened really fast, and it was done on a partisan basis. I obviously don't support the tax plan for a number of reasons, but now we've moved into this infrastructure conversation. And to really do infrastructure the right way, we needed investment from the federal government. I think that investment should be at least $200 billion to really create a transformative infrastructure plan. $200 billion from the federal government, when combined with other capital from states, local governments, private sector, could create $1 trillion of infrastructure funding, create 10 million jobs, rebuild our country. But the question is, where do you get the $200 billion from? And to me, the easiest thing to do is to go back as part of fixing this tax law is to raise the corporate rate from 21 to 23. And the reason I focus on the corporate rate is because for years, the business groups who would come to the Hill and talk about the need to make our tax code more competitive would say that we need to get the rate to 25% from 35 to make it competitive.
I hear all that.
We took it all the way to 21.
I appreciate that. But here's the thing. What we've always found in the past, sir, is that when you give Congress money for infrastructure, we actually don't get that much infrastructure out of it. You know, you get these big shovel-ready plans, and nothing's actually ready. The transmission mechanism appears to be broken. Taxpayers at airports in New York City pay fees every time they fly to fix the airports, but they're still really bad, as we saw in JFK over the weekend. You guys can't seem to manage to dole it out in ways that actually serve the American people.
I just don't think that's correct. Right? The Highway Trust Fund, which funds 90% of the surface transportation projects in this country, which is the roads and bridges and transit systems we have in this country, is funded by the gas tax, which hasn't been raised since 1992 or 93. Right? So there's a deficit every year in the Highway Trust Fund, and the Congress kind of makes up that deficit by just plugging the hole. And pretty much everyone agrees who's looked at the infrastructure problems in this country that the Highway Trust Fund is a very successful way. The federal government takes the money and gives it to the states based on the priorities that they put forth. They actually have to apply for this money, and the federal government gives them the money. We haven't raised the funding in the Highway Trust Fund in a long time. One of the things I've proposed doing with additional $200 billion is put another $120 billion in the Highway Trust Fund, and that would create a lot more funding on infrastructure. So I just don't think the kind of analysis that the reason we have poor infrastructure in this country is because, like, government being bad at it. If you look at the data across the last kind of 3 or 4 decades, we have cut our investment in infrastructure as a percentage of our economy in half.
But
right? So relative to what we used to
hold
spend
on one second. Elon wants to get a question in here as well, sir.
But Congressman, does tying your proposal to increasing the corporate rate just make it a non-starter? I mean, is this really an honest attempt at a bipartisan compromise here?
Yes. I think every Democrat would support it, and I think a lot of Republicans would support it. Listen, the goal for corporate tax reform for a long time was to bring it down to 25%. We kind of overshot that and went to 21%. At some point, they were negotiating with themselves, bringing it all the way down to 21%. So I think if you brought it to 23%, you would still be way ahead of where the business community wanted it.
Would you support other ways to pay for it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other ways to pay for it. You could. The president talked for a long time about carried interest, right, and changing the tax code to fix that, what most people view as a loophole. That generates actually about $200 billion of revenues if you fix that. So there's another way to pay for it. So, but you know, you really have to do infrastructure as part of tax reform. That's the point I've been making for a long time. Because the way they did this tax reform is it ended up kind of costing the federal government about $1.5 trillion over 10 years. But the way they came up with that was big changes. On one side was $5 trillion, on the other side was $3.5 trillion. You want to have infrastructure in the mix, so you create a funding mechanism for more infrastructure.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.